That's building a corporate training strategy. And we'll show you what we think are steps that we've had clients take over the last couple of decades. Some have been successful, really successful, and some not so successful, and we're trying to glean from all of that and help streamline it for you so that based on your corporation, organization, your approach, how is it going to best serve your activities? And frankly, from our perspective, certainly we always want to attend to how the legal aspects are met both by OSHA, ASME, it could be in Singapore, it could be a Ministry of Manpower, it can be British standards, it can be Australian standards. There's a ton of worldwide regulations that are imposed locally. But you know, at the end of the day, it's about practical efforts that we're really improving the skills and enhancing the skills and knowledge of our folks. And by doing so, certainly we're going to be improving our operations from a safety standpoint. But I guess I can tell you in 25, 26 years of ITI, it really isn't about safety training, it's about technical skills training, which will lead to a safer and lower risk environment. So it's a great byproduct, but that isn't always our first push, because by improving the practical application, practical side of it, we will achieve those safer steps in load handling and load moving. So we'll be addressing very quickly today a bit on some things that you all have going, in some cases, train the trainer or in-house training versus out-of-house training. And we picked two significant subjects. One is mobile crane, 5 elements that should be in your program, and then a rigging side. And then of course, we have a question and answer. In the last couple of webinars we've had, sometimes the question and answer goes into 45 minutes even after the program, and we seem to have a retention of like 80% of the attendees stick around, and we really pop questions up. We've got some great people assisting today in this webinar that will bring these questions up, and Zach is able to then keep an ongoing dialogue with those questions downstream after, if we need to do additional research or maybe some of the other attendees have some of those answers. We're going to do everything we can to get some of the solutions to you. In the tips section here for maximizing your participation and your information coming to you, it is interactive because we do have the ability to ask questions and get those brought up, and we'll put those in front of everybody. We're able to answer most of them. Sometimes they're dual questions from 2 or 3 folks on the same subject item, so I'll try to address those singly. We do want you to think about the presentation and format about what's the long-term, how does this affect us long-term, and this is an excellent subject for that based on building a corporate strategy. So this will be all over this single subject item of long-term mindset for expansion, consolidation, maximizing your workforce, and so on. Questions are there. Use the question panel, and then we'll have a few polls going along as we move between subjects. So let's take a look. How to build a corporate strategy and what and why, and the strategy approach and methodology. Those are things that are an in-house effort that you can you have some folks likely in-house that we understand we have needs. You may decide to subcontract some of your work out, but for the things that we have employees doing in-house under our oversight, immediate oversight, we'll have some target points that, gee, we need to ramp up our skills, our knowledge, our capabilities, enhance some of our equipment so we can do these more efficient, a little safer. Everything has to roll forward with it, and your strategy really has to point. It's all a big funnel. It's all moving towards this narrow gate at the bottom end that is, how do we make that happen, and how do we make it come out smoothly and effectively on the far end at minimum cost and maximum impact. And one thing that you want to obviously watch is on the subcontractors. We have a lot of organizations that impose basically the same training requirements and or qualification requirements for subcontractors as they do employees. And these will be things you'll be wanting to visit with your subcontractors as you have them arrive for work and then participating alongside your employees, or to serve, to perform work for you, to live by your corporate rules, as well as the local regulations, as well as the safe practices by the organization. So subcontractors are not out of the loop here. They're certainly in the mix, and there'll be some things that you're going to be wanting to ask them as you let those contracts and bring those people on site, that they're towing the mark as your own employees do. We are, as I stated, cost efficient, time, and then we want to have good outcomes and then measuring methods to judge those by. There are some potential solutions for training for your folks, and I've just listed here a number of items that are brought to light that from your organization. I'll just use Carl Johnson down at BP in Houston as a good example. They can opt to have vendors come on site to do certain balance of their training. They may send, and this is really for the large number of folks that you're going to have, and it may be in a certain subject area. You may have 300 people target, and out of that group, 240 of them need the general knowledge information for the subject. Let's say it's basic to journeyman rigger type information. And then there may be, and see this offsite, maybe at a special training center, that they may take out of that 300, take 60, maybe roll those out 4, 5, 6 at a time for specialized training, because of the offsite training provides an environment that with specialized equipment that gets them in a quieter setting, and they can really focus a lot deeper on some of the subject content that's there without the demands and without the sometimes, unfortunately, interference of a local training activity where they can get pulled out of a program, or we're having to work around a whole lot of work activity that's going on at the same site. This really, I would endorse or encourage that you have the specialized training. Really is for that offsite where you send folks out where you really can't provide the real depth that you want. We find a good offsite location that they've got, and when I kind of call them all the tools for providing the specialized training. In some cases, I know a number of organizations around have training centers, training sites that and relating this to rigging, maybe have jacks and rollers, have inclined planes, we have drifting structures. Some folks have trailers that they load and offload, lashing activities for load securement, all kinds of things that they've got all the tools, all the equipment, and the ground space and floor space to accommodate that, and that specialized training is really important. And it's sometimes very difficult to do at a live location at your particular work site. So there is a call and need quite often for off-site training. They always want to be dealing with as our society gets a little more wrapped around the axle in for training and certification resources. That's a big deal to make sure that whatever training is being done, it's well documented, and if there is certification available for the successful candidates, that is being able to be acquired and be achieved, whether that's on-site or off-site. And it could be through the next step here, and I've got this pulled up, is e-learning. A number of organizations have e-learning opportunities, and I do want you to think about seeing what is available for e-learning in the subject areas of real interest to you. And surprisingly enough, and not ours only, there's a lot of organizations out there that have great e-learning packages, and that's able to deal with a variety of base or core subjects that before the practical activity. So you'll notice there's e-learning here we've got on weight estimation, center of gravity, load distribution, short segments, 30 to 40-minute segments, load control, sling tension, and so on. So e-learning is becoming obviously a lot more popular. It's a lot more efficient way to take care of some of the core subjects, and I'd suggest that to do some investigation on some of that. You can take a look at our site, but a number of other sites, a number of other folks have e-learning as well. Find the one that best fits you, and find the one that is going to be most applicable to your application. Could be forklifts, overhead cranes. There's a number of hours of information. You always kind of break the training activity into classroom, hands-on, and then potentially some testing. Some of that classroom can be dealt with through really good e-learning packages, something that's certainly to investigate. As we discussed a few minutes ago, we have some of the possible solutions to help integrate into your corporate strategy is what are we doing with our own trainers? And we did, we'll break this out just a little bit in a few minutes on training in-house folks to be able to conduct training for some of some of the masses, some of the larger population of employees within a site. So this on-site in-house instruction and then consulting services. Quite often we provide, a client will call us or one of our competitors and ask us to come in and do an audit and to do an evaluation of what are the crane activities by operation, inspection, and maintenance, and we'll cover that same subject in the rigging portion, and then from the management support portions. And an audit will help reveal some of the gaps that we might have, where this will blend into the training strategy overall, and where our strengths are, and what we don't really need to go spend money on on the right side over here, but we need to spend on the left side, and focus that and raise that skill and knowledge level up a little bit on in certain segments or certain areas. Doesn't really cost a lot of money, but it sure can unfold a whole host of information to our management groups to help them understand the direction they might want to be choosing to go. We have a number of clients that have called us and said, you know, we want to compete at the world level. And, well, to do that, it doesn't take a lot of money, but it takes a commitment to culture and a commitment to mindset and change and modification in some cases to help get things going. In our last program that we had, last webinar, as you all recall, it's a lot of top-down. It really, management needs to buy into it, and it needs to, they wrap their arms fully around it, and then they keep working it down through the organization. Training the newest hires and then not following those rules or those practices in our organization is the fastest way to kill a good training program. We need to practice what we preach, and so the management needs to endorse and back up and support the things that are being provided for the education for their folks. So, and that's generally very, happens quite often well, and we're not, the good companies know how to practice that, I guess is a way to say it. So, and the development approach, I think one thing you want to do is to take a look at and identify some of the things. What do we do as a company? And let's just say, I'll go back to Carl's organization at BP. They're in the oil refining business. What do we do and what do we pay others to do? So there is a demarcation or a line in the sand right there. And if we're going to continually provide or perform some services in-house with subcontractors or contractors, that generally can be taken off the list for the training area as an expense item for the organization. But it may end up that by training activities, you may end up being able to perform some of those yourself with your own employees through quick and efficient training sessions and practical sessions, and it may be cheaper and easier to handle some of those subcontracted items now with your own in-house employees if that's efficient for your operation. One of the big items, we've been through a number of certification. I have the pleasure of working with a couple of certification groups in the United States, and the big thing that we always do first up is, gee, if we're going to provide any kind of training activity, it's defining the task. And so what is it we're asking folks to do? And it's just more or less, we've all referred to this as a job task analysis. But out of the, for certain employees, they may have, say, 5 different items that they're really going to be attending to in a year's time. And are they prepared? Have we given them the tools and knowledge to be able to do that? And so we want to look through those job tasks, identify which ones are okay, and we'll say check those off and yes, because the performance is there, it's documented, we've got it covered. And then find out one that says, you know, we need to help our folks out in this particular category or area. We're seeing maybe a rise in incident rate, a rise in injury rate, damaged equipment, those kinds of things. So defining the task, identifying the target points, and deciding how we're going to knock that one down and how many people might that affect. Well, to make some of the decisions downstream, we can take a look at what is our current expertise. Is the subject item something that we need to deal with in-house, or is the expertise of our folks on that on that particular item, is it at the 50% point or at the 10% point, 80%? What do we need to do to fill that in? And we need to identify what modules or what subject content is going to help us get over the hump and get them up to a very practiced, very competent level. Find the knowledge gaps. It's a bit about finding out with our discovery with the job task analysis and finding out our current expertise. Sometimes we do a little bit of testing. Heck, even sometimes we'll go into a facility and provide some written tests and some practical tests. And we'll ask, we might toss a small written test package or verbal test package in front of a randomly selected group of folks, and we're going to find out where the gaps are, and using those tools to measure and identify what's missing, what was not provided maybe in an early craft or early training or early apprenticeship program through the written process, and for sure through the practical process. So let's go rig and move a couple of loads out here and see what the practices are. Are we using sling protection? Are we understanding sling angles and the effects with that additional tension? Is the crane operation, is it quite a bit more cowboy in the approach and ramming and slamming and hoisting quickly and tossing loads around a bit? Those learning gaps will show up in the practical side, and those are things by observation. We want to make sure, okay, we need to help curb this, reorient the employees in these certain areas. There may be some unknown disregard, meaning they don't know what they don't know sometimes. Other cases it may be, we've just acquired some bad practices over time. We need to turn the corner with that. So the learning gaps, it can be exposed by written activity, by practical, obviously, and by interviewing. So and by observation. So you'll know what those are quite often, but sometimes you need a little bit more expertise, maybe somebody that's a subject matter expert to help come in and provide some of that review with you, and then identify where those are popping up. And that's a bit back where some of that audit is. And it certainly can be done in-house. We have, I'll use Ulster Power. They may have 4 rigging experts and a couple of crane experts in-house. Well, I've seen a good group like that sometimes create a crane and rigging team in-house. That's our corporate crane and rigging team, and they'll provide that in-house auditing process. And in some cases, other folks just decide, no, we're going to bring that in as a third party. We want to qualify that third party. They really know what they're doing, and they can help provide the answers succinctly and give us really good direction. So in helping develop that strategy too, this is something that's heavily embraced in a lot of areas, is cross-training of employees. We've noticed since the 70s and 80s some turning of where folks are being asked, and just because of competition worldwide and some of the other things that are happening, folks are having basically multitasking into other areas, carpenters helping electricians, electricians helping pipe fitters in certain lead-up tasks. Everybody's got their own calling and their own assignment, but as an assistant in certain areas, they can support those other crafts and trades. But that means a little bit of cross-training to know what to expect when things start moving and being handled, and getting a little bit of education about that other craft is very helpful. So a little cross-training has been very beneficial for a number of organizations. This is probably one of the biggest items right here that we see needs to be happening, is measuring the results. So that really calls for pre-testing or pre-information and post. And downstream, quite often, we also do a 1 year to 2 year milestone evaluation. So measuring your results, we can always do training and say, gosh, everybody's smart now and everybody's capable and competent. But what we really want to do is measure the pre-standing. Where did we start from? Get a good gauge and judgment of that, and where did we get to later on? And as we noted in a prior presentation, sometimes that training activity takes us up to a new knowledge level. Some of that knowledge comes down because of over time period and a little bit of lack of use. Each one of these steps is a training step, and we're taken up to a new level and continue to raise our knowledge base on a regular basis. Sometimes this gets lost a little bit from time and lack of use, but we'll eventually, we're going to get some of these folks right up to that level that we want them to be. And so I would encourage you to support that and measure the results effectively, know where our new bases are and our new plateaus are. And building the pipeline for the future, that's really about preparing for tomorrow. And that is grooming folks into, and I think a great example of this is to, we want some folks to, obviously a new element certainly happening in the United States and around the world is lift director. And how do we groom lift directors? And so we may start with a basic rigger. We can start with a mobile crane operator apprentice, you might say. There could be a whole variety or field of folks coming together. But as they grow and move up in their training activities as well as their responsibilities in the company, this young guy right here might be a master rigger. We may have a young lady that's a mobile crane operator. Now that she's a mobile crane operator, say a level 3, at this point we need to cross-train a little bit. That operator needs to know more about rigging, and the rigger needs to know about crane operations before they get to that lift director stage. This lift director really needs to be a Johnny expert on crane operations, both overhead, mobile, gantry systems, jacking and rolling. So that's where the heavy rigging activities come, and the crane operation. But that third leg is going to be process, methods, sequence, assignment of personnel, and all those things. So grooming these folks, and it may take 4, 8, 10 years, but downstream you've got people already in the pipeline. We want to be looking forward. How are we going to groom these folks? Because in 10, 15 years, we're going to need folks in the supervisory role that have a really good base and a good crosscut of all the operations that we're doing. So I think the big thing is building the pipeline for tomorrow, and this is really about preparing and grooming folks along the way. And the last one, of course, we said, well, what can we do now that we've got more advanced or more experienced or more competent people? Can we take over some of those tasks that we might have been leaning on for contractors to do for us? In the development of this, I'm going to toss the slide up here for you. There's really a form that can maybe start some homework ideas for us, and we can get these out to you if you want to email Zach at ITI, Z-A-C-K, and we can drop these out to you. But we have actually a training strategy development form that it really starts to talk about how many people are involved, and I'll bounce this up for you a little bit. How many people are involved in crane and rigging, employee diagnostic? What is their role? What's the title? And what type of activities and how many folks are there? Turnover rate, obviously, and computer access. But do you contract out some of your crane and rigging work? And then it gets down to, if so, what positions do they cover? Have you verified that their folks are qualified? How many locations do you require training? And you have different training managers around. What's your crane inventory look like? Because when you develop a crane and rigging strategy, a training strategy, we need to understand, all of us, we need to know, okay, what do we have for equipment? What do we rent? What we might want to be buying downstream to supplement our fleet based on the activities that we're about to charge forward with in the next 2 to 5 to 8 years. So what does our current equipment list look like? What do we generally rig with? Are we damaging a lot of rigging? Are we having dropping a lot of loads, things happening along the way? And maybe we need to change our strategy. The training strategy will be modified if we change some of that equipment out. I can tell you we have a ton of web slings and round slings in our own organization, and as well as chain slings and wire rope slings. But there's really a cultural change we're working. Synthetic rigging is great, but it is, if we don't protect it, it really, it needs protection. And you're going to hear me say that a lot in every program that we have. We're finding a lot of folks converting back to chain, alloy chain, good robust equipment, and sometimes it's changing the rigging methods. It's about what are we using for equipment today, what might we be using for equipment tomorrow. And BTH LDs, below the hook lifting devices, Maybe we're using a lot of rigging sometimes when we should be actually developing and designing custom lifting devices that will quickly and efficiently move objects, move product from one part to another of our location. There's a whole, getting a snapshot of where we're at today and where we want to be. This can actually expedite and enhance operation, 5, 8, 10%, just by changing some of the equipment out and simplifying it and take away some of those lower some of the risk elements and some of the hazards associated with it. One thing you definitely want to be addressing in developing your training strategy, because it has something to do with the certification and qualification requirements, is there anything that we're doing that could be deemed construction? Because obviously we have crane operators have to be certified by 2014. We have to have qualified signal persons, qualified riggers. If we have construction-related activities within our location, these are things that an employer is really going to need to take a look at, because those will require in some parts some additional significant training elements, as well as some certification and qualification items. This is just gets down to do you have a crane and rigging manual? How much training is done in-house? How would you value or rate the training that you're doing today? Let's pull up. We've got once that kind of approach and sort of a questionnaire is done for you, then we can get a summary developed. And this isn't all special about ITI. Anybody can do this. I want you to just kind of take in the concept here how many mobile crane folks there are. We put them into user activities, but how many employees might be there: active riggers, crane oversight folks, lift directors, site supervisors, AD directors, and so on, maintenance personnel. So we're looking at the number of folks we have today and how we're going to deal and address and build up their knowledge base and fill in any learning gaps. So we really start breaking it down into categories and responsibility areas, all the operations, and then we get down to designing the corporate strategy. Let me get down here to training solutions. In some cases, so for Melton Electric, this is the challenge: does not have a training plan in place. Obtain third-party qualification, or they could appoint an in-house person to perform certain level of training for certain subjects. And based on our training evaluations, identifying how can we simply accomplish those. In some cases, like basic rigger signal person, hey, let's do that e-learning. Maybe a lift director CLP for core basic information, let's do that e-learning. In some cases, crane and rigging manual, that may be in-house or out-of-house, that may be another effort. So there's a lot of ways to attack something like this, but getting our arms around it. Where do we start? How do we get the game plan going and use the playbook? So let me go back for just a minute, and we'll continue on. These are we always want to make sure that we're minimums and standards. I know you heard me say a minute ago, I'm not all about, gosh, it's not all about OSHA training, it's about practical, and that's true. Obviously, we have to make sure we are meeting the minimum OSHA requirements. I think one thing that I constantly remind myself and my staff of is most of the OSHA requirements are written in blood, and the reason that they're in law is because something has happened. We've lost people, serious injuries or fatalities have occurred. Those are darn sure areas that I want to make sure we're paying attention to, and we're ensuring that we have competent folks performing and practicing our best practices by OSHA, ASME, and certainly according to the manufacturer's requirements. So these are always minimums. We can always do better, and in most cases we do. Manufacturers actually have precedence over OSHA for their equipment as long as it meets the standing requirements. In the people, places, and things for our training standard, we want to make sure that in developing the strategy, it's about the competency of the people, where our operations are, and sometimes we can change or modify some of those, and these things are the equipment that we're handling loads with and the product that we're handling. I will tell you that in helping identify some of the challenges that we have, you're going to continually hear additional phrases about modularizing loads. So where it used to be a single load yesterday, Now, a lot of them facilities are modularizing where they're adding 3 components or 4 components to the same load, and now they've got a whole new load package that they're dealing with. Yesterday it was just single items, get them on pallets, get them out of the building, and good to go. Today, clients are asking, let's put all those together, be an assembly point. So it's even challenging facilities that maybe have, they're maxed out at a 20-ton overhead crane system series throughout a whole bunch of bays. And that was fine for the single items here, but now they're making 2 crane picks to help accommodate that kind of lifting activity using spreader bars and lots of other items. And it gets a little dicier anytime we have 2 cranes or more. So we're actually sometimes overwhelming the lifting equipment that we have in-house because our work product is being modularized and added and components built on bigger racks, cheaper way to ship it, easier to handle it, hopefully, but we've got to have sufficient size equipment to do that. And in all the doing of that, we've got to have folks that know how to manage it. So these are areas that we've identified. Management support, as we talked about, top down, small investment in equipment. Heck, you know, if you buy you can buy a 10-ton spreader bar for maybe $1,200 to $1,500, depending on where you get it. But, you know, it's amortized over 10 years and takes good inspection and maintenance. But for just a small amount of money, sometimes it can make a huge difference in our handling and load handling and capabilities. Certainly we want to be adopting the best practices of the industry. ASME is a great place for guidelines and user information, and then certainly the manufacturer, but use the playbook. And that playbook may be by ASME, OSHA, but also the corporate guidelines. How are we going to manage ourselves for our load handling activities? And certainly always come back to a certification and qualification required. If so, my goodness, we really need to make sure that we've got the documentation taken care of and our folks are really competent. One thing we want to be careful of is somebody walks in with a certification card that says, yeah, I'm a large hydraulic crane operator, and the guy may only have 100 hours of seat time, but he's got a card in his pocket that he's, you know, he can run he tested on a crane that's a 90-ton hydraulic crane, but he only has 6 hours of seat time in that size crane. Now we're asking him to work a 150 or 200-ton crane. Well, you know what? We need to get that guy in the seat, give him some practice time. So besides the qualification, just don't go to sleep at night thinking the qualification or certification card is all that in a bag of chips. We really need to make sure that we've got some time for those folks to get more competent and capable operating some of the bigger equipment or more unique work sites and load handling areas that are going to challenge him. We just took on a case accident that happened down in Grand Prairie, Texas on a tilt-up construction, and the guy was a certified operator. But we had a 35-ton concrete panel slammed down on top of an employee, but this was really the guy's first time ever doing tilt-up construction as an operator. He was scared to death. He said, you know, I'm not going to do this tomorrow. And my goodness, all of a sudden, within 20 minutes, we had a dead guy on the ground. So it's one that, is he competent to serve as an operator for at a minimum level? Yes. But, boy, you really want to make sure that we've got skill setting in the seat. And if not, we're going to need to make sure we've got time to get that skill built up. So it takes seat time to accomplish that. In the employees, and one thing I do want to encourage you, a successful training program is going to result in exercising new muscles for the employees, making sure we're measuring our milestone, and that's going into downstream evaluation. This is the training. It's got to be like oatmeal on the wall. Is it sticking? Is it working? Or did we revert back to some of the old practices that probably are greater risk areas? So we need to measure this downstream, finding the gaps. And I would suggest strongly that in certain environments, certain applications, we really need to identify, especially where the specialized training is. I use these terms, laser beam, 30-06, and surgical strike, but it gets down to we have certain evolutions of load handling that we really need to maybe do a mock-up for, maybe do a dry run. There are all kinds of different ways. It's kind of like paper doll rigging, but it gets down to handling something that's not really expensive that simulates that. And there certainly are simulators for cranes, and in some cases it can be done with rigging, but it's specialized training that puts the skill in the backpack of the person performing the work that really ramps his capability up to a very, very high level. You all notice that the military, the police department, all these groups really focus on training firefighters. It's a huge element to get them ready to when they experience the reality and experience a true event right in their face, they know exactly what to do. And that's what that specialized training is for. So it's not for everybody. It's not looking at if you've got 1,000 employees, don't put 1,000 people through it. But it gets down to that handful, maybe at 10 or 12 people. All right, let's get this team dialed up so that they're really on their game. Measure the results and keep supporting people. Certainly we've chatted about that. There are different ways to get the training accomplished. And in some cases, OJT is certainly still a popular way. Vendor training can be on for specialized products. I know Crosby and some of the other folks do product training, which is great. It's not a lot of application training, but it's about the special elements that we're supposed to consider when we're using their product, and we certainly should adhere to that. So local rigging shops can provide some of that type of training. And then we have in-house training that can be accomplished, 2 to 4 hours. Manufacturers can be come in and provide. We have certainly e-learning that is there, and then specialized, which gets down to that really intense level where it's interactive. There's some classroom, but lots of hands-on with it. We actually have a poll question for you right now. We're going to put up on the screen. So let's take a look. You all have the opportunity to give your response to the poll that's on the screen, and we're going to drop right back into our presentation. Does your company currently have an ongoing training strategy for employees? Yes. Formal procedure planning? Yes. Informal, little planning, or no? And then just hit the submit, and we'll just keep rolling along. Okay, and you can see the results there. It looks about 50% have some formal in-house approach, and about 20% don't have a current strategy. And all this poll results are just to help us realize in a cross-cut of our society of folks that are participating today, there's room for growth, room for improvement, and we can make some big headway and strong steps forward by taking a little more formalized approach to this. If you take a look at the train-the-trainer pros and cons, we have 3 short subjects left before the end of our webinar here before we get to questions and answers. I have been asked, a number of clients have asked me, and that's why this particular series came up. What are pros and cons for train-the-trainer doing in-house training versus out-of-house training? So, one area that we really want to consider is there enough specific training that training department person can afford full-time corporate instructor? So a good example might be if at a warehouse or paper mill, they may have 40 forklifts on site, and they may have 120 to 150 employees that are or need to be qualified and regularly monitored or qualified for forklift operation. That's probably a great category that would justify an in-house training activity. And for a large organization, lots of footprints, lots of acreage, lots of product movement. Forklift is a great subject where that often falls into play. If your site doesn't, it might have 1 or 2 forklifts, and you still have 600 employees, that's obviously something just contract out or get someone in to come in for a day or 2 and help handle for you. So there are times and places where you have this super large inventory of that type of product or equipment, and that makes sense to have that full-time instructor. He'll spend at least half a year probably doing forklifts qualification and or requalification. Item 2 here is he really, one thing you really want to make sure is whoever we put into the driver's seat, so to speak, as that corporate trainer, are they a subject matter expert in the content? They need to be able to, we at ITI and other organizations, you need to have 3 times the knowledge that you're teaching as far as your competency and skill level. You need to be able to answer questions quickly, know the regulations, know the standards, know the manufacturer's instructions, know the best practices, and really be a living example of proper methodology. and be able to relay that in the classroom and in practical environment. So, but it's hard to do if you're not really a subject matter expert in the content. So make sure if you're going to do and have in-house trainers that they really are good SMEs. They really know what they're doing. And if you don't have a good SME, it really will compromise your training program. People won't want to go to it. They won't believe who's teaching them. If the guy can teach 42 subjects and they're all really different, they probably have a hard time with credibility identifying this guy as really a subject matter expert in all 42 subjects. So be cautious. Make sure you've got the right person in the right job there because they've got to really preach all the right message. And the third item here is the curriculum dedicated, and is it current? Are they keeping up with the newer OSHA regulations, ASME standards, current practices by those manufacturers? What happens sometimes is you may end up with one program that's being conducted in 2012 by this particular in-house instructor, maybe another one in 2013, and maybe another one comes up in 2015. Well, the guy really isn't staying current with the information, and he certainly isn't staying fresh because he's not getting enough presentation time to stay up with that program content. So and that probably is a place, if you have intermittent training in various subjects, probably just as well to bring in a third party. They're fresh with that information and so on. But for the large items that you have, that you can employ a full-time in-house trainer for 3 months, 6 months on a certain subject, then you probably have enough to fund that to be able to accommodate that level of training and then fill in with additional items downstream, either in the regular workforce for his other assignments or with additional training subjects that he may roll off with, hazardous materials, confined space, all those other kind of items that are fairly common in general to our work sites. Before we go to the next one, I have another poll question for you, so let's pop that up on the screen. How much of your company's crane and rigging activities, skills training is conducted in-house? So if you just hit the appropriate box, and what do you do for in-house training for crane and rigging stuff, 0 to 25, up to 50, 75, or 100, or my company does not have any skills training in this area, just hit submit, and we'll see what our results are. Okay, looks like we got the results in, so about 15% in the 0 to 25. You guys can see the results there. It's about a quarter of the way through. Then 23% we don't have any skills to provide the in-house training, and that's okay too. That's just, hey, you do what you do for a living. Other folks can provide some of that information as needed and beef that up for you. It's really interesting. About a quarter of the companies attending today have 76 to 100% of their training is in-house, which is great. And a lot of times, just as the last slide, we'll go back into the presentation here. As the last slide indicated, our presenters, our trainers in-house, they really want to stay up current with the information and stay on top of the game. These are some things that folks have asked us about. Advantages for third party, regardless of who that is, comes in. You really want to qualify some of your folks. I know we pay for training to come into our organization, first aid training, firefighting training, all kinds of different various subjects. And I really qualify and want to know, it isn't about price, it's about delivery, it's about information and content. I really want to know that we're going to be spending our time appropriately. And our lost production for taking those people off work to go get that training is a huge bill. So we want to make sure that we're spending it properly with a well-qualified organization. Most of the advantages with really good qualified outside training groups, it's going to typically, as I've made a statement here, generally succinct and properly placed. It is generally well organized. Those are things you're going to want to get references for folks that you're considering using, and they offer a good training, and a good trainer is going to provide. He's going to go out and borrow. You know, we do this quite a bit actually. There's some things that are in line crew rigging training that for transmission distribution, we've actually taken those items into underground mining applications. So there's tips and tricks of the trade that happen in one industry, get borrowed and take a look and get employed in another industry, and all of a sudden, wow, it's really a problem solver. So that's a good thing about having an outside group sometimes come in. They can borrow ideas and concepts and approaches they've seen in other industries that might never have occurred in the site industry, but using competent folks, qualified equipment, qualified methods and techniques, and proven systems, and actually expedite and make more efficient that local site event. So that's something that is a good possibility that happens by using a good, competent outside group. A lot of times more objective, especially when we get into the right down here. More objective really is if you have to provide qualifications for certain employees or certification in some cases. For an in-house trainer to know everybody in the room and to have played baseball with them and go to lunch and have family picnics and all those things, sometimes you really have to make sure you set that aside. And objectivity, especially when you're doing qualification work, sometimes you really want to stay at arm's length a bit in that relationship, because nothing can influence that. It needs to be as fair as it can possibly be, and that's sometimes easier to achieve with a third party versus an in-house qualifier to some degree. So a good third party provider is going to understand the latest changes to the industry. And something that I'm not, I really have to kind of hit this one between the eyes. Good training organizations, professional training organizations, make sure that they've got folks that understand adult education. And that really isn't a big element in a lot of areas for in-house trainers, is how do I take in an adult setting, how do I not embarrass a student? I don't want to slam him. I don't want to harm or injure his image. I want to make sure that we deal with objections, contrary positions, different ideas. We want to melt that into the program and capture the positive energy of that person and not turn them off the first thing in the day and the guy's got evil eyes for you all the rest of the day. It's about taking a challenging statement, position, attitude, or approach and turning that into a positive. And a good professional training group, their folks are trained to do that. And that is a benefit of having an outside organization sometimes, unless you invest in getting that skill set into your in-house trainers. So we're all about adult education. We all know that we're 30, 40, 50 years old, and yet we have resistance to change. We have objections because we have a history or understanding of some old method that Bill showed, George showed, Ralph showed, Jim, and all of a sudden, just by the phone game, I'm learning how to do this. And sometimes we have to change that. Sometimes that wasn't the best approach, and we've got to be able to have the professional skill to turn the corner with that employee or those employees and get them on the road to proper practices. And sometimes that is a person that's really well-schooled in adult education. And then, and that really relates down here, getting rid of some bad practices and getting them on the right tack and the right approach. Let's take a look. These are just 5 little frames on mobile crane training and good basics. These are the things, that 5 elements that we would endorse or encourage on how to quickly get a good crane operator program, and we've got a rigging program second. Then we're ready for questions. But step 1 really is about the basics, and this can be done. We have written in down here. This might be easily done by some e-learning, because there's a certain amount that's going to be classroom, and then a certain amount is going to be practical. So on the classroom part, some of these items can be accomplished by using good e-learning packages or quick classroom parts. I would suggest to you, hey, there's a great way. We get our instructors to let's get the folks out of the classroom. Let's go out to the field. Let's get on the cranes. Let's level those cranes and get them oriented properly. Let's take green hands, people that don't know much about cranes. That's a great place to start. And then certainly, you can look pictures in books all day long, but getting them out to the cranes is really awesome, because They really get a practical feel for setup and leveling, limitations about swing area, outrigger crowding into certain areas, proper blocking and cribbing for outriggers, getting away from backfill areas, soft soils, and all those things. Control functions, obviously limitations, and certainly doing a pre-operational inspection. But boy, if we can get them out of the classroom, if that's your route, get them right out to the field right off the bat. They get excited about the subject area and they really want to eat and digest more quickly. And you've got buy-in, and that's really important to get them started off in the right area. There is a second area right here is core knowledge, and those are really about the specifics, good practices. That can be done both classroom and field, and about knowing good speed, good operating methods, slow, easy techniques. You definitely want to get rid of the cowboy activity out of an operator's hands, and slow and steady wins the race. But operating practices also has a classroom side because there are limitations, as we noted from the last slide, and recommendations from the manufacturer of all the do's and don'ts with a particular crane. Load charts, that's a lot of classroom, but that can also melt out into the field for making live decisions on making a pick at short radius out to long radius, short boom length out to long boom length, and all those things. So, but we really have to, this is really a super knowledge block here, and we really want to make sure that we have folks that their load chart knowledge and operator practices, manufacturer's instructions, and certainly OSHA and ASME limitations, requirements, and guidance is followed. This likely is your largest classroom portion to be able to attack when really grooming up and training crane operators. The third item here is, boy, I can't say it enough, and I've put 3 times down there, seat time, seat time, seat time. I know that if we have 5 to 8 to 10 people in a crane program and that you're managing one at your own site in-house, or you're going to set one up, seat time is really important, but it's unfortunate we just can't spend 100% at the seat times level because we're missing a lot of the other core elements that are important to it. But I would push heavily if you can afford up to 30% of your program time into the practical side for operations, and if for a week you can get or rent another crane to come in beside the crane that's already there, you'll double up your seat time availability. You'll get more people in the seats. You'll get more practice time under the oversight of an experienced crane operator, which is the instructor, and you'll get more build competency faster. Have them break the crane down, move the crane, reset the crane, level it. Have them get a job, bring loads up to the crane. They've got to pick, rig, pick, move, signal, tag line, get them to make load chart decisions right on the fly. The instructor's right there making sure that we're within capacity and within capability of the machine, but they're having to make active decisions. And that they really should be using real loads, real signalers, and real tagline people, which can be some of the other operators from the program. But the more realistic it is, the better reception you're going to have out of it. Then you want to cover one of the last items is, and this can be a combination of classroom and field, but all the specialty things certainly work with live loads, but integrate the signals and taglines, make sure that we've got good understanding of signaling methods, both radio and hand signals, understand power line restrictions, obstructions, parking the crane, getting it stowed away for the evening or the week or the month. Those are all cleanup areas, but they really are important. Obviously, power line's a huge issue to make sure that we've got well-groomed operators that understand the new requirements from the 1926, especially in the construction mode, 1926 .1400 standard that's out and it's been out for a couple of years. So just make sure we've really got an understanding, can manage our cranes, and help educate sometimes our field foremen and superintendents as to the limitations and things that we can and can't do with the cranes in those settings. And I guess the last thing really for mobile cranes is to make sure we want some kind of evaluation. If it's really just sort of a basic operator's course, we're going to dial up some folks. We're going to grab 12, and we're going to see how they do, and eventually we're going to find 5, 6, or 7 good operators out of that. You're going to want to do full documentation. It's always important of all the efforts. What program materials did we use? How was the course outline run? And what were the testing elements along the way? And where did we because it's all about measuring. If you remember that measuring gaps, we just don't have anything else to go by sometimes except what is written, where did we fall down, where are we not getting the information across, or where is the candidate or student not comprehending what's there, and then what is the practical side? Are they able to perform based on the instructions of a standard operation assignment? So we have to have measuring devices, and those are really important because we need to know what do we need to fix, and then, or do we have the tools and do we have the content to fix that? Now, I'm sure you all have seen it as well, whether it's driving vehicles along the interstate, big trucks, small cars, cranes, forklifts, whatever. Sometimes we have folks that have a bit of a disconnect between their brain and their hands, and they're just not cut out to be a crane operator. And sometimes you just got to break the message to them early on that without a whole lot of practical time and seat time, either they are real jittery, they're really intimidated, they're really slow reacting, they're not, it'd be 1,000 things, but not everybody's built to be a crane operator. The man or woman might be really super in tool room inspections, maybe, who knows, but it just may not be his cup of tea. So you're going to need to find that out. What happens is if you try to push people into being an operator that really aren't competent, really aren't confident, and they're intimidated by it, we put a huge risk to all of our employees, our operation, and our equipment, and to that individual as well. So you remember I just told you about that fatality down in Texas. Well, that operator was really feeling queasy about doing that, just wasn't really confident, and we've got a terrible result out of that, and we just don't want to put people in positions where it's beyond their skill level and knowledge level. It's basically the Peter principle, and we're elevating to a level of incompetency, and it's not because they're a bad person. It's just that's just not their thing. So some of this evaluation is going to have to unveil that, and we're going to have to make some decisions accordingly. The big, the big thing we're going to need to do is target for growth and improvement. What are we going to do there, and how can we enhance that? One thing I encourage you to think about, even with your skilled operators, once in a while, run a rodeo. Do a skills rodeo. Do something fun in between training sessions. If you got a training session every 2 years or 3 years, maybe at the 18-month mark, run a rodeo, a skills rodeo out in the back parking lot. Put some loads out there. Make it a day long, have some prizes. It can be depth perception, it can be time and speed, it can be machine control, it can be part written testing. Just make it fun, have a great time with it, and make it challenging but achievable. But do some fun things in between that are keeping the skill sets up and letting people know, hey, I need to make sure I enhance that part of my activity. But rodeo in between, you can do it with forklifts, overhead cranes, mobile cranes. It really doesn't matter. But you're reinvigorating them to maintain their skill level. That's I think the biggest part of what we want to take care of. And then the next level I want to make sure is you've got seasoned operators. Hey, is there another level to this? Absolutely. We may need to be providing them with specialized training in multiple crane lifts if that's something that's going on at your activity, or two hook picks. There's a new writing in B30.5 for mobile cranes on using the main and auxiliary simultaneously. It's been done for years, but now we're providing some guidance for it. And it's not a very common item, but I'll tell you, it's good training and good practices and procedures need to be in place. We're going to use both hooks on the same crane to pick the same load. Limitations have to be put in place, but that's specialized training. That's where we take people to the next level. And as you know, there's a huge push on for assembly disassembly director that needs to be attended to, lift director and critical lift planning. And these are all for mobile crane folks, ditto potentially for rigging folks downstream. And just blow through this really quickly. Rigging basics. This is a lot of hands-on. Try to have as much hands-on time in this for your folks. It can be done by e-learning, which is a great way to get through some of the core information, and then always wrap it up with good practical application. But understanding rigging types, capacities, hitches, limitations, and what kind of protection needs to be used. For the basics, core knowledge is the inspection and the requirements, whether it's the Alberta requirements, British Columbia requirements, wherever we're at. Load weight, which is always the core base of any rigging task, is what's it weigh, where's the CG, and where's the sling tension. So we get down to making sure we got understanding. And this is sometimes this is a little more classroom, but these things can be done with dynamometers in the field. We integrate this a ton with dynos and load cells and all kinds of things to help people get the understanding of where's the center of gravity, what's that mean to loading at pick points A and B versus pick points C and D, and what that eventually grow into for sling tensions and levelness of the load. So some of it can be done classroom, some field, but make a blend, make it fun. I think it's probably the easiest subject in the world is to make it interactive workshops. We want folks involved, problem solving, and they'll feel better about it. We're building tools and skills in them using rigging cards and other information and data that I think we all rise to a challenge. If somebody throws the gauntlet down in front of us in a program, boy, just the competitive nature of us, we really like to solve those items. And we really hate monologue. It's all blasting one way, and it's just a huge pullback in any kind of rigging or crane work. So if we can get it more interactive, get people problem solving and getting their input and getting their decision system in gear, we're going to make better performance, folks, in the field. So certainly about sling tensions, rigging to the hook, and procedure and methods, those are all going to lead to somebody becoming a lift director and things downstream. You'll notice on the board here I've got practical, definitely practical. You don't want to have a rigging program without having some get dirty sections. I mean, this is really whether it's raining, snowing, going sideways, or whatever we're doing, but folks really like to apply what they've learned and do it right and understand what do we need to work out of my practices. Am I doing something that I learned about 30 years ago that really should be modified and enhanced? And what do I need? And sometimes that's only going to surface when we're doing live load rigging and load handling and moving point A to point B. And it's more than just this little light items. I mean, we need to 2,000, 8, 10, 20, 30, 50,000 pound loads, good size rigging, good sling protection, but really getting people out there and putting them to the test and performance. It's really important. Implementation of methods and perform with knowledge. That's really the deal, is to make sure folks are doing it. Remember I said earlier, OSHA and ASME is important? No doubt about that. That's the good practices and good guidelines, but it's really about performing with knowledge. I think if we do anything in training and get people up to another level, it's that they can competently perform with confidence and knowledge. So that's where we want to get folks to. Okay, we've got another poll question right here. It's popped up on the screen for us. What percentage of crane and rigging training programs that you've experienced, witnessed, or overseen has hands-on? So it's only crane and rigging. And what percentage have you witnessed or experienced that has hands-on? So 25 to 50 to 75 to 100%. And then go ahead and hit submit. I'll be ready for you as soon as we get done with the poll. We're just about done. We're ready for some questions and answers here. I hope you got your questions starting to type into the submit box there also. And so, yeah, it's about, in this poll for the attendees here listed, it's about 38%, 0 to 25%. And 100%, that's super. Look at that, 76 to 100%, 21% of our attendees have hands-on involved in that. So that's great. We just want to look for every opportunity, get the hands-on there, and this takes us to our last slide here, actively, because always, as we said before, evaluate, because how do we know what to improve if we don't evaluate by written or verbal and by practical application, getting them to do in the field, find the gaps, and target areas for improvement. And this leads to folks that once they get that basic rigging, journeyman rigging level, is to do they assist on other projects that include maybe jacking and rolling, winches and blocks, load turning. This all specialized items here. This is the area that we want to make sure we can help enhance folks in. Complex rigging, spreader bars, lifting devices, and areas that might involve lift directing or CLP. So once we get that core base laid, then let's look and see what do we ask them to do in their job task analysis. And besides basic rigging, they do a ton of load turning. Well, let's make sure we include that. That might not be in a regular program for rigging, but we need to potentially enhance that with other folks for specialized information. Okay, we do have one more poll for you on future subjects, and then we're going to go into our Q&A, question and answer. Select a subject you'd like to see in a future webinar. We've got AD Director, lift plan considerations, effective training methods for field personnel, ASME updates, and e-learning opportunities. So go ahead and click. I think you actually can pick multiple of these. Please select all that apply and hit submit. And then we're going to start taking some questions and answers here in just a minute. We'll see how our poll comes out. Okay, and we're going to capture this for future work, for future webinars. A huge interest in lift planning and effective training methods for field personnel, and then ASME updates, of course, and then e-learning. So we're going to be moving forward with some of those subjects. Thanks so much for the contributions for that. I really appreciate the time with you, and I look forward. We've got some questions coming up to us. I see them on the screen here. So I've got a question. Donna Dutcher. Hi, Donna. It's nice to have you with us today. Thanks for joining us. Donna's got a question. Is it true that a crane hook is purchased with a safety lock? It must remain and not removed. Also, is it true that you can buy a crane hook without a safety? Okay, great question. Let me say, and Donna's question is about crane hooks. And Donna's been with us before. It's a great question. So crane hooks in the U.S., they must have a latch. And so think about it this way. If it's a machinery, meaning equipment that's hoisting equipment, whether that's mobile crane, overhead crane, come-alongs, chain hoists, chain falls, etc., basically they all have to have a latch, and I'll give you the exception. So they all must have a latch, except, and Donna, this may be in some place where you guys are at with doing some of the hot work, except when it creates a greater hazard to the employee. So that would be, and generally it can be hot work. So we've got temperatures, elevated temperatures that may be 1,000 degrees. It could be 1,500 degrees in furnace work or pouring, things like that. But you can't put a latch on get an employee up somewhere where the hook and all the rigging, all the pots, all those things. So we're going to put off to here to the side that we have hot work. That generally what we want to do is get an OSHA variance from the local OSHA office, and you can submit, here's our work activity. We would like an official variance in writing from OSHA that gives us the ability to not have a hook latch on our crane hooks because of these circumstances. Generally, hot work is I think you'll already find a letter for interpretation for a variance for hot work. And I say hot work, it's elevated temperatures where a latch is just simply impractical. It will burn the employee to get that close to the area that you have to connect and disconnect to a ladle or a beam, and it's simply beyond reason. It creates a greater risk and hazard to the employee by having a latch on than not having a latch on. So hot work, and sometimes where you have acids or fumes in that local area for that crane, that would potentially impact and create a greater hazard for that floor rigger to go up and pull that latch back to make an engagement. Even with PPE and so on, you want to be able to drive that crane hook in, pick up a ladle or pick up an item, on basically using the crane hook like a fishing hook, and go in and snag that item, pick it up, and then transport it somewhere else and then disengage it. So for a couple of reasons, there are already existing variances I've seen in print at client facilities for those two reasons. that that's when the exception can be granted. So that's a great question, Donna. Thank you so much for that. I've got another question coming up on the screen from Dennis Potter. Hi, Dennis. Thanks for writing in. His questions: when contractors come to my facility, are they required to follow company-specific policies, or do they only have to follow their own? Your corporate policies, and I got to tell you that first thing is that subcontractors inevitably must follow, and I'm giving you that as a Parnell answer here, but you can't have two levels of safety going on at the same site. So your employees are working up here to this level of safety, and your subcontractors are working over here, because a lot of times the employees over here and subcontractors over here, they'll be crossing over and working together, and we just can't afford to have two levels of practices going on in the same event. It's actually, you're going to run into a legal issue as well to have two different level safety policies in effect on the same site with common work between two different craft groups. You get one hurt and the other hurt, all of a sudden it's really about what's in the construction world today. It's about controlling entity, and we're going to see a lot of basically some legal reaction out of how that gets done. But the controlling entity is the people or folks that control the work site. So we always want to make sure that even though you may not provide direct supervision for their activities, they really need to be following the corporate policies of the site owner and the site group that manages that location. You will have huge blowback both from safety practices going on, and I'm going to tell you right now, I have a dozen court cases on my shelf over here, and about a half of those have to do with folks that are somewhat following varying safety practices based on main contractor, subcontractor, and it always comes back. The main contractor safety policies are the ones that take precedence, the ones that own that site or manage that site. So this really can't be going on the location. Dennis, thanks very much for the question. It's excellent. I got a question, Donna Dutcher. We have a third-party crane inspector come in every 6 months for inspection because of high dust. Do you have any other suggestion for high dust environments where it comes to overhead cranes? You know, we were working with a project up in Alberta with Agrium. They were working in the same environment, really dusty. It's a fertilizer location, and they get up. They actually, in certain environments, will provide water washdown, and so we need to try to control that by getting the dust environments to water spray and washing down. Generally, air is generally not the answer because we're then sending those microns and all that dust into the air, and just relocating is all really doing. But washing down, but we have to lock out, tag out the cranes because of electrical hazards and potential, and take care of, make sure we have no electrical issues when we're providing water in some of those areas. But expediting it, we do have rail brushes on an overhead crane that can push material off the rail, and rail sweeps basically that can help knock some of that debris off, and so it doesn't get impacted too much. But the only one, Donna, I wouldn't use air. I'd use water, low pressure potentially in some cases. Get it into a slurry a bit, and then get it down onto the floor and get it relocated and moved, because it really is going to hamper. Sometimes it can even hamper, well, certainly hamper the inspection items that have to be covered, but we need to get a clean runway and clean workspace. Donna, it's a great question. I appreciate that. Dennis Potter, we have a question. I strive to stay ahead of the crane. The game is keeping up with standards. Are there any new channels, subscriptions, associations I can stay up with? And, you know, I'll tell you one thing that you might do is take a look at Maximum Capacity Media. They're a magazine group. They have Crane Hotline, and they also have Crane and Rigging Hotline. And within those magazines, they've got various associations that are listed. And so taking a look at their site, they list associations like ACRP, Association of Crane and Rigging Professionals. There is certainly SCNRA. for large crane and rigging activities and transportation activities. There's a Crane Association of BC in Canada. There are local provincial groups, but these are where folks understand about crane and rigging consulting and training and new information about new engineered products. These are about new services for load handling and transportation. But Crane and Rigging Hotline through Maximum Capacity Media is going to be a great resource to go to, and they have a lot of links to a lot of organizations that might be fit the cup of tea that you're looking for to keep up with what's happening in the industry. Let me take a look at another question here we've got from Scott Pete. Let's see, would you agree, the greener the operator, the team, the better the rigger? From my experience, a great rigger can make a mediocre operator perform better, even above their skill level. I'd say that's probably true. Let me get a new though I got to say, really good riggers and really poor operators, you know, each one's going to show up in its own handling of the load. So it can be well rigged, well controlled, everything's peachy. We get a star for the day there, and all of a sudden this is off in the toilet here. I will say that the good rigger can signal and flag and manipulate that load into, and with taglines, manipulate that load into a specific area. If he's really calm, really quiet with his hands, and he's really controlling the operator, he can overcome some poor moving and load handling by an operator to get him to calm down and get him to go slow and steady to manage and manipulate that load into place. The main thing here is, does the operator really understand the load capacity chart and making sure that we're within capacity to make that. So if we got all the technical elements knocked down, we can get the load handling can be accomplished by a really good rigger on the ground. I really agree with you, Scott. I think that's probably, it can be done, but you know what? If you just got a poor operator, a bad operator, he's not going to help you. He's just going to be slamming and banging things. You probably want to have a talk with supervision and get him out of the seat. ASME from Scott Weber, great question. Let me get this going here. Scott Weber's got a question. ASME says that wire rope slings need to have tags on them, but OSHA does not require. Is that true? So Scott, under the new, sorry about that, under the new, there was a provision in June of 2011 that from OSHA that does now require wire rope slings to have tags. So if you'll take a look on the OSHA.gov website, and you'll see sling information there. Actually, if you'll email Zach at ITI, I can get you the document that's called out here. And so for wire rope slings, that was the only last puppy dog that didn't have tagging on it, more or less. Wire rope slings to be tagged for manufacturer and working load limit or rated load, as well as shackles, basically shackles for hardware. So chain slings have always had to be tagged. Synthetic web slings, round slings are really not a big subject in OSHA, but those certainly are tagged. But there is a new requirement. It's fairly recent, and thanks for your question, but they do have to be tagged now as a result of the new OSHA final rule published last summer. Let's see, Richard Dresser, you've got a question, a follow-up to Donna's question about hooks without latches for loading or unloading. I'm not quite sure about your question, Richard, but if you have a crane hook that does not have a latch on it because of a hot work environment, that latch is absent. Generally what happens is all the work area where that crane hook is working will have a large bail for a pick point for the objects and the loads that they've got to pick, and that crane hook is negotiated into that large pass-through port to be able to, under a control condition with the operator, to lower that block into position, go forward, and engage that lifting bale on that item that they got to pick up, which has got to be a nice big target. Engage it, hoist it, and trolley, bridge, etc., and then lower it. So it can be done by a skilled operator, and most of those operators in steel mills and other hot work environments are practiced and trained to do that from the crane cab or by radio remote control or sometimes pendant control. So I noticed Boeing even does that from time to time with the bales that they have that in certain dipping areas where they have acids and things, they don't want people over the fumes, so they'll have a few crane blocks that don't have latches. But your picking accessory, your lug, has to be big so that the operator can manipulate that hook into place and make that engagement work. And when the load is set down, to then successfully lower that hook down, back it out, and get the crane away from that object. I hope I answered your question there. Let's see. Any good suggestions on how to clean drill rig juice off of the rigging? And that's really just slime. It's basically mud, bentonite, clay, and water. And so for we don't. I got to tell you, restaurant grade degreasing is. We use it all the time for our cranes and rigging here for inspection purposes. Restaurant grade only because it's more biodegradable and more friendly to the environment, and degreasing to try to catch it in mats, catch basins or tarps. But it's just spray, 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 and clean and dig. If you really got it, we do need to do competent inspections on our slings and rigging and on our hoist ropes. And if we get that so caked, we've got to get it off. It may be scraping and spraying both, but use a restaurant grade degreaser, and they make some very robust degreasers to take that mud off so we can get down to inspection. That's a great question. I appreciate that. Let's see, William Diaz, ASME, can we punch shackle to create a serial number traceability in order to make inspections? So Bill Diaz, William Diaz, thanks for that question. Let me take a look. Let me, while I have you here, let me bring up something for you. And really marking for shackles, if you don't have an ASME B30.26, I'd encourage you to get that. I'm going to pull this up for you. And there are places and ways to mark shackles, but it should be done by the original manufacturer or fabricator, or manufacturer, I'm sorry. And I'm just pulling the B30.26 up for you on the screen here. I hope everybody can see that. That identification is name or trademark of the shackle, rated load and size. And then it gets down to the shackle identification shall be maintained by the user to be legible. One thing I really want to encourage you to think about, I'm going to see if I can pull this up, and because we have an area that we want to be really careful of, and what talks about repairs or modifications. So repairs, alterations, or modifications specified by the shackle manufacturer or qualified person. There's a comment that has to do with that portion, and then replacement parts and pins and so on. I think what the key is, we would consider stamping a shackle in the field. We would consider that a modification. And so once we've got maybe some letters or numbers that are worn, or we want to put the company numbers or a serial number on that shackle, we want to be very careful and cautious. We have embossing, which are raised letters, or stamped already from the manufacturer that already gives us working load limit, manufacturer, and size. Those are basically, if it's an ASME shackle, those are the three items. If we're going to go over and actually embed and place a serial number over here on the shackle, we need to get the manufacturer's approval, because what's going to happen is we can start a stress concentration point by stamping with V-notch stamps. And a V-notch stamp looks like this when it embeds into that steel, and we want to be really darn careful. Normally they're going to tell us to use low impact, low impression stamps, which actually have a bull nose, and it's a rounded surface at the bottom of the stamp. and it kind of ends up like Braille. So instead of a super big 5, let's say we're going to serial number this shackle as number 5 with a big V-notch stamp. The low impression stamps end up with little baby dots that give the letter or number, and the soft bottom, soft dish curve reduces the opportunity for a stress concentration point. So they'll typically tell us, if you're going to stamp it, we want you to stamp it at X location right there. We want you to use low impact stamps, and don't stamp it anywhere else. They know where the stress points are in the shackle, so they'll give us the location and the stamp type. And I'll tell you, I'm going to really encourage you, get it in writing from the manufacturer of that shackle, and don't deviate from that, because we can create stress concentration points. I'm going to slap something up on the screen here. I know we just got a little bit of time left, but let's see. I've got a shackle failure I want to show you really quick. And this really starts out as a stress concentration point, and boy, I'll tell you, it can eat you up in a heartbeat. It's really a good shackle, 35-ton shackle, and I want you to take a look with me here. This is a stress concentration point that was initiated on the inside of the bow of the shackle, and these striations are sort of an ocean beachfront fatigue fracture that started because of the nick that was started, which is equivalent to a hard stamp after heat treating of the shackle. So then that's the same separation point. Don't forget this is a 35-ton shackle. There's nothing missing in this shackle. That shackle that is a highly ductile shackle, and that separation point to your left and to your right actually matches up, and is how the shackle failed from the inside of the shackle leg. So a good-sized nick started that, and under repetitive lift activity, that shackle failed, dropped the load. Fortunately, there were no injuries. It's a Crosby shackle. Nobody got sued over it. Just happened, and basically lack of inspections because they didn't see the crack where it started. Now this area right here is the bearing point up where the shackle is taking load in the bow of the shackle, and that little separation or crack is the flashing of that material. I'll go back a couple of shots and show you. That's right here. That's the bow of the shackle, and this area right over here is the side leg of the shackle where the separation occurred. So, and the reason I bring this up is because cracking, stress fractures can occur, and we want to make sure that the stamps we're using, a great question, don't be stamping all over shackles with serial numbers and company names and this and that. There's very specific instruction needs to accommodate, and instruction on how to do that properly. Let's take a look. Richard Dresser's got a question. How about hooks without latches for loading, unloading, i.e. off of trailers? And I'm not quite sure on the question, Richard. Let's see, but I've given you an example off of trailers. I'm going to need some more clarification, Richard. I'm not going to be able to address that question for you, buddy. I'm sorry, I'm not quite getting the intent of your question. I don't want to go off on a bunny trail here and get down to where we're not answering it succinctly. Great question here. Jay's got a question. Shackles need tag, serial number, and traceability. I'll tell you that from an ASME perspective, let me do it this way. Here's OSHA, and this is about shackle marking and your organization. And so from ASME, it's working load limit, manufacturer, and size. OSHA requires the manufacturer and working load limit, 2 items. And your organization, my suggestion to you is, at a minimum, is to mirror the ASME group, working load limit, manufacturer, size. But also, if you choose, you can put a serial number on. It is not required by OSHA or ASME. And that's about the only way. If you're going to do traceable inspections, about the only way I know to do that is using RFID or barcode or serial numbers And again, I go back to my last discussion about proper stamping techniques and so on, but it is not required. It's not required by ASME for having unique numbers for Shackles nor for OSHA. So only by, it would be only subject to your own personal organization, and you want to develop a really good method for developing that traceable numbering system. Great question. I appreciate that. We've had a great time today, and I really want to thank you all for participating with us. And we've got a number of webinars coming up in the near future. You'll be getting announcements. Please bring a friend. We're going to have some great subjects coming up this summer and this fall. Join us again, and we look forward to a great time together. Just drop me an email if you need to on anything, and I'll try to get back with you and one of my folks. And my email, and I'll just put that up on the screen for you if you need to get a hold of me personally, and that's mike@iti.com. And thanks very much, and I hope everybody has a great weekend. Thanks, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, thanks, Mike, and everybody. You'll be getting an email to be able to download the presentation today, as well as watch recordings and participate in the discussion board. So have a great weekend, and rig it right. Talk later.
Okay.